by show of hands, how many of you have raised venture capital for your current business or for prior businesses? Okay, so about half the audience, that's great. I'm John Spiritos. I'll talk to you about another office that we work very closely with, the small business office. They do a phenomenal job. And we're sort of that next phase beyond that. We have the commercial strategies office. So the commercial strategies office was formed in 2019 to sort of address a problem that's become fairly large. And that is the shift in venture capital and private equity in terms of its sources has moved from the West largely to the East, with China delivering about 35% of the world's venture capital. Just to give you some context, to pick on the Chinese for a moment, since 2020, they've started about 1,700 new funds with $1.5 trillion devoted to venture technology. It's not private equity buyout, that's just venture alone. Okay, it's a daunting amount of money, and you can see what the effort behind it is starting to produce in the paper. So we formed the office with a simple set of objectives. One is to basically prevent adversarial investment and adversarial involvement in a lot of the performers we're working with. Why? Because adversaries from around the world, not just from Asia, have perfected the art of working the system in the US to their advantage, whether it's taking IP out of bankruptcy, investing to get observation rights, or just outright investing for purposes of gaining knowledge. In fact, it's sort of ironic at this particular point in time that nearly every major venture capital fund, and we'll talk about why we know this in a minute, has adversarial interests in it, as limited partners, as general partners, and as direct investors through sidecar investments and other vehicles in some of the most promising technologies that the United States and the Western world is developing, and in particular DARPA. So we're hoping to, what we're doing, sorry, a little bit of feedback. What we're working on inside of the organization is to accelerate the commercialization of DARPA technology through a number of different means, getting involved in the programs relatively early on, working with them through their phases, as Jen pointed out, sort of active engagement, coaching and mentoring, and then hopefully helping them transition to commercial products. The fundamental thing that we try to deal with, it's the metric that we focus on in my group, is traversing what we call the valley of death. And as one of our directors once noted a number of years ago, this is the organization DARPA that's developed the mRNA vaccine all the way back to the internet. Okay, so some fundamental breakthroughs have been developed in DARPA, as you all know, and hopefully a number of you are going to be involved in the next series of innovative developments that come out of the organization. But the core question we're now addressing is, what if we could actually develop the business opportunity and the technology? Okay, dramatically shortening the time between ideation and your pitch and your proposal, all the way through to the point where there's a commercial customer. That commercial customer could be within the Pentagon or allied forces. It could also be a normal commercial customer under the circumstances. So what's the valley of death to us? Every day in the building, we live and breathe this concept of DARPA hard. What's hard? The technology is hard. Fulfilling the mission is hard. Contributing to the research base of a particular technology is always the goal, advancing knowledge. Juxtapose that for those of you who have raised money from private sector, what they focus on. They focus on the team. What's your business model? How much money are you going to burn? What are the unit economics associated with what you're developing? Does anybody care? Okay. And then the secondary issue is, okay, how do you make it if it's a hard good? And how do you distribute it if it's a hard or a soft good? And are you helping the industry or are you destroying the industry? How many competitors are out there? And the reason we focus on this is because once we let out an RFI or an RFP and you all respond, the genie is out of the bottle. People know what we in the building are up to. So then we all are in a race to get the technology out to the market as quickly as possible and prove a point. Okay, now we want to take it one step further, which is not only prove the point that the technology can be efficacious, you can deliver what you've promised, but that we can also get it to the market to have an impact or an effect. So what we do in our group is we close the gap. Our group's relatively new, as I said, started in 2019, but it's comprised of people that have both government and commercial experience. I'm what's called a commercial IPA, and that is I'm actually on loan to the Department of Defense and DARPA from the private sector. In the private sector, I run the private equity arm of a firm called Macquarie Capital. We are the largest infrastructure investor on the planet. We manage about $1 trillion of our money and other people's money. And we have groups all over the world that invest in new and innovative, deep infrastructure technology that no one really has ever heard of, but they care deeply about when it doesn't work. Sound familiar? For purposes of maintaining advantage in commercial markets. We have the same sort of benefit here. And so we've taken a bunch of people that kind of look like me, behave like me, probably speak a little bit slower. And we've pulled them together to basically bridge the gap between the ideation, the development of the technology by you, the commercialization of the technology and the teams, putting them together with venture capitalists, private equity investors, commercial lenders, and in some cases, different parts of the US government, and we'll get to that in a minute, for purposes of shortening the time that is needed to get a product to the market if it has promise. So we think everything we invest in has promise, but some promises are better than others as we go through the paces. So we want to work with this group of folks that really have the ability and the willingness to take the product to its umpteenth state or its final state, which is commercialization, whether it's to the DoD or the private sector, so to speak, in as short a period of time as possible. I mean, as you all know, the number one reason companies fail, technology companies fail, is quite simply lack of capital. And we've all heard the same stories. 1 out of 10 gets funded. Of the 10 that get funded, 1 out of 10 creates a product. Of the ones that create a product, 1 out of 10 generates $1 million in revenue. And 1 out of 10 of those gets acquired. So your odds of success are ridiculously small, right? And I think you all know that. What we're trying to do is increase the odds of success by mitigating a couple of factors. We don't solve the technology problem for you, you do, but we can help you with the capital part of it. So just to level set you, you've probably been approached. We're in the equivalent of what I characterize as a little bit of a defense bubble right now. And what does that mean? There is an enormous amount of capital chasing performers. This is probably the best time in my professional career to raise money for a company that's doing something for a defense department. There's enormous amounts of patriotic capital. We unfortunately are involved in a number of conflicts around the world that are driving investors to understand that there's opportunity in creating new companies. You think of the Andurils, the Saronics of the world, folks that have come out of nowhere to all of a sudden supply very advanced technology to the warfighter and to further the mission. Then we all know about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia with the use of autonomy. So in our little world, we sort of think we have an unfair advantage at DARPA. Why? Because we work in the factory. The factory is you. You produce the technology. You produce the technology consistent with the programs that our program offices let out and pursue. So we think we have a pretty good eye through the 260-some programs that we run and the thousands of portfolio companies and performers that we work with on what cool technology looks like in the swim lanes that we operate. And you know about the 6 of them, including the MTO. So from there, we have a pretty good vantage point of what may or may not be attractive to the warfighter and the Department of Defense, both in the US and in other parts of the world. And our commercial partners that we work with, as well as our performers, come in different t-shirt sizes. Small, early stage investors, some of you are here, or early stage companies, like some of you here, all the way through to some of the largest primes that want to do something cool and innovative and apply to one of the programs. So our mandate is to prevent technological surprise. And we want to foster the technology through its fruition by introducing those companies and those performers to the commercial market space and or to financial sponsors and advisors who can help the company move through its paces. Juxtapose that against sort of different parts of the DoD, DIU and the Office of Strategic Capital. These are organizations we work with closely. They may have already reached out to you. So DIU is based in Silicon Valley. It often goes out and buys technology that we may or may not be involved in at DARPA and pulls it into the Department of Defense, says to the Pentagon, hey, this is really, really cool. You ought to have some of this, and here are 6 widgets, try them out. It's an interesting and needed function. And the idea behind it is there may be gaps or areas that we may have missed on the DARPA side or in other parts of the DoD. They leverage the network that they have in Silicon Valley to find companies that probably have, in most cases, dual-use technology that might be of interest to some or one or more applications that are being pursued in the Pentagon. And then there's the Office of Strategic Capital. Office of Strategic Capital is an interesting entity in and of itself in the sense that they've sponsored a number of SBA or SBI funds that represent about $200 million each. And there's about 15 of them, and they go out and look at and for companies that are in the strategic supply chain. And they make investments through the portfolio, through the funds themselves, that there isn't DoD money in it, but there is Department of Commerce money in those funds. And then they also provide loan guarantees and loan authority. So if you have a promising technology, you need to manufacture it, you got a buyer, but you don't have the manufacturing capability, their model is to basically provide that bridge debt capital on a quasi-subsidized basis through a loan guarantee, through a traditional bank, to help you ramp up the organization. And again, they are working with small and medium-sized companies, and the idea is to put their money to work, the balance sheet of the Pentagon, the Department of Defense to work, to make sure that the companies that they're working with that show promise don't fall into the wrong hands or, quite honestly, go out of business. So within the DoD, we have sort of three different ways of dealing with commercial opportunity. One is go out and find it, which is what Office of Strategic Capital as well as DIU does. And then in the case of our group within DARPA, we work with the performers that are selected by the program offices, because we believe that the program officers, the rock stars, understand exactly what's needed for the mission that they're pursuing. So it's a lot of fun. So let me tell you about our toolkit for a little bit. So our initiatives come in about 5 different flavors. We have, and many of you have probably heard about this, and some of you may have been involved in them a number of years ago, the Embedded Entrepreneur Initiative. It is what it sounds like. We actually pay you to work with somebody that we know, that you find helpful, to help you ramp up your organization, okay? And we do that because, one, we think you're super important to our overall mission, and 2, we think you need to move a little bit faster than you're currently moving. Or in some cases, and we get this all the time, you know, we work with PhDs in research labs who basically said, I'm not good at this being ramp the company up, commercialize it, can you help me out? And so we'll bring somebody in, we'll actually work on a spin-out, for example, of that particular technology in a corporate entity, and then introduce them to private equity or venture investor. The EEI initiative is really successful. They're with you for about a year. You get one shot at it. You don't get 2 EEIs. You don't get one EEI, then another one shortly after that. You get one EEI. They help you ramp up your business plan and your business model. And we also do some level of market analysis, and I'll get to why that's important in a little bit. So they work on the financial model, they work on the commercialization model, they help you out with staffing, and then ultimately they help you out with go-to-market. Then we have another program called the accelerators. We have 5 accelerators located around the country. They've been vetted by us. And what we do is something similar where the accelerator will work with us and a performer in the accelerator environment. Think of a Y Combinator-like environment to help you scale the business up. Not everybody wants to go to an accelerator. Some folks really like the EI program. Some folks like both of them. And we've often done that where we have you work with an accelerator and then we assign an EEI through the accelerator to you for purposes of ramping the organization up. And you get to work with some people that have sort of been there and done that. Most of the accelerators we work with are processing 10, 15, 20, 30 companies at a time. And so they're in the flow of how to get things scaled up quickly in their local communities and are connected to venture investors, some of which we work with, some of which we don't work with. Then we have this other concept called a tiger team. That is, you've developed something. It's pretty far along. You can make more than one of them. It works. And we got a call from the Pentagon that says, we need 10 of these now, okay? So we will work with you and swarm your organization with resources to be able to produce those 10 things. It's not that we don't do it that often. It's really hard. It moves very fast. It's a lot of fun if you work on them. On my end, it's great. But we mostly do them for technologies that all of a sudden become important for national security reasons. And so we go through that journey with you as you ramp up the technology. We get to a point where we understand, okay, this could be really, really important for X, Y, and Z, we think. And you may be thinking that as well, but we'll actually validate the what we think part by putting it in front of people in certain agencies to basically figure out whether or not it's really cool. And if it is, and they need 10 of them, we'll help you make them. And again, we pay for that. Then there's the MVP. It is what it sounds like. You've got something, you got 2 or 3 things that you're interested in, one of which can be made, say, quasi-commercially. We'll help you get that product to commercial state and introduce you to both public sector and private sector commercial partners that may be helpful through our network of people. Like I said, we have a bunch of people in our organization who kind of look like me. So we all come with gray hair and 25, 30 years of experience in the technology and private equity space, and we have Rolodexes. So we're simply opening up our Rolodex to you saying, we'll show you how to get into this company. Instead of it taking 3 months or 3 days, let's just go down the street and go talk to them, okay? And so we'll use our Rolodexes where necessary to get you into the right place to develop an MVP-like opportunity for that particular product with that particular customer. And that may be a prime, for example, that is looking for advanced technology to slot into a program. You know it's a fit, but you can't get to the prime very effectively. Then the last thing is venture horizons, which is something I work on most of my time, which is bringing qualified investors to DARPA. And we'll talk about this in a little more detail in a couple of slides. But basically, we're working with the investment community at large, Western European investors included. And we kicked this off in Q4 just from a dead stop, so to speak. We decided we'd just go out, issue an RFI, and figure it out, within a relatively short period of time, who wants to work with us? So we basically let out an RFI that said, we're DARPA, we invest in really cool technology, we work with some of the smartest people in the world. Would you like to, possibly talk to us about investing in some of these performers? In 6 days, we got 125 firms with $150 billion of capital. So we figured, okay, 6 days, I'll leave it open a little bit longer and see what happens. So we got a bunch more applicants, and then we had a kickoff meeting, and then we just opened up the RFI and shut it down again and picked up another $25 billion of capital. So we have about $150 to $175 billion of dry powder available through about 150 funds and firms around the world that are interested in talking to you. One condition, they can't represent our adversaries. So we're very careful about working with them. We're very careful about checking them out, but we want to make sure it's clean capital that we can be proud of standing behind as we introduce them to you. And then what we've done, and I'll talk about in a little bit, we've had a couple of show and tell days where we'll bring in, we had the first one we kicked off in March. And again, it was one of those, we're going to have a meeting in March. We sent it out at the end of January. So we gave people 5-6 weeks to show up in Boston at our offices. We had 300 people show up representing 110 firms. Every single firm that had responded to the RFI showed up. And unfortunately for us, this is my mistake, we only had 8 performers present, okay? But all 8 got financing. So we called it a win, went home. But the point is there was a demand signal. And then we did that 3 more times later this summer, and we'll do it again in the fall. We're trying to curate sort of our approach in terms of thematic days, investor days, company sizes, because we had companies that were relatively small, and we also had companies that had 100 million in revenue, and they were perfect for private equity firms. Then the other thing we do with the program offices is we work on proposal preparation so that our program officers are aware of the fact that you should be looking for the commercial angle to what you're asking somebody to do. Just ask the question, is this commercially viable? What other markets may it apply to? And then when we get involved with the performer, everything that we do revolves around transition support. How do I transition the technology from its then state to its ultimate state? In my world, in my life, a long time ago, my first 2, I spent 25 years running tech companies. I was in your seat. I actually sat in these types of meetings. And my first 2 companies were DARPA performers. And I just thought everybody did that. Invest in cool technology, develop cool technology, commercialize it, ramp it up, take it public, go on to the next one. Apparently, that was sort of at the onset of the internet and then all the way through to about 2015, 2018. And it was a great, great model, but it became incredibly competitive globally. So now what we're trying to do at DARPA is up the game. And so that we want to start working with you early on to make sure that you're able to cross that chasm sooner, and you do it with the lever that we bring to the table. The thing that DARPA brings to the table that's super advantageous for you, and I wish I had it 25 years ago, was we're funding the technology risk to a fairly material degree with you. So you're using the dollars we give you to de-risk the technology. From an investor's perspective, that is a frickin' home run, okay? Let me get this straight. Somebody else is paying this company to develop technology that I can invest in when I choose based on the risk factor. That's great. That's cool. That's really attractive to the private sector markets. And then if you wrap it together with a business plan, decent management team, you have something. And that's really what we focus on. So here are the things we sort of work on. This is 6. We've probably got 100 and some projects like this in place. But they're incredibly interesting. So Micah talked to you earlier about the quantum initiative. So how are we helpful there? One is working with Micah to make sure that there's the right capital is going into the performers that he's working with. Micah's got this great function, he and Joe, where they're using public sector dollars, or venture dollars, private equity dollars, to develop technology that are going through his rubric. So he's using a framework to figure out who actually might have a widget that works. What we're working with them on is getting the dollars necessary to build the facilities around the country that are needed to make this stuff a reality. So we launched a program with the state of Illinois. They put $500 million to work in a giant refrigerator / data center facility in Illinois. Working with the state of New Mexico, doing the same thing. We've got the state of Maryland as well. So we have members of our team who are actually very good at extracting public dollars from pockets that you always wouldn't necessarily always think of, particularly state and local dollars in states where they have budget surpluses, have a desire to develop cool technology, and left. This is an autonomous battleship, okay? It is the coolest thing you've ever seen. It gets launched in the next couple of weeks. It's now a public program. What's neat about it is they broke all the rules relative to maritime engineering because there are no people on this ship and there are no people to be intended on this ship. So it is super fast, super agile, can withstand ridiculous sea levels because humans can't. When they're on these ships, and it represents the next generation of warfighting capability for the maritime effort, for the Navy. And that's the prototype. It'll do a world tour, and we're working with private sector partners for purposes of actually making it. Now, the nice thing about making this ship is it doesn't need to be made in a Class 1 yard. It can be made in a Class 2 or Class 3 yard. Think yards that make, I don't know, tugs and fishing vessels. So it's modular, the design's modular. It can be made inland and then ported to the water and assembled modularly, and it's ready to go. Incredible concept, great execution by the team. And it goes on and on. You've probably heard about our resilient software program. Instead of worrying about bugs, how about make the software so that it is not buggable from the get-go? Meaning work in the context of the system being designed so that attack-proof from the beginning. And there's a whole swim lane of teams working on it. And then we have a number of initiatives in the BTO office, which is fascinating because this is the area that can directly impact the warfighter most materially. In this case, F-Sharp and another one called Focus Pharma. F-Sharp is basically blood substitute that can be managed at room temperature or higher, held in packs. An amazing impact on the longevity of the warfighter, and then obviously the commercial and civilian applications are apparent. In the remaining time, I'll walk through a couple of the events that we've held. So this was our first event I mentioned earlier. So we had 125 investors, 300 and some people. We had some great speakers from different parts of the Department of Defense. We had Dr. Niewood, who is essentially the Air Force's chief strategist, give a talk that was worth its weight in gold for the people that attended in the audience. And then we also had a variety of speakers from the different branches to basically speak to the technologies that they find interesting that you, in fact, are developing so that the investors in the audience understood which way the Department of Defense was leaning, right? We brought the investors in the room with the performers for a particular reason. We thought the performers were really interesting, doing great work. They're using DARPA dollars. We brought the buyer in, the Department of Defense, to say, these things are really cool and interesting. You ought to think about them. And to our credit, luckily we had 11 companies present. One was a not-for-profit. 2 weren't raising capital, and the rest all received term sheets. And they're closing their rounds now. And then my friend from Hyma Therapeutics gave us a great quote: most valuable financing-focused event that the government's ever put on. And that was the drop-the-mic moment for us. So we said, okay, let's do this again. We'll figure out what's next. So we held 3 sessions over the summer, 52 performers, 100 investors, a little bit more thematic, intelligent and resilient systems, the future battlefield, which was really cool. It was mostly about autonomy. And then we had quantum and biology in the brain, new things that we're working on in BTO and new sensing technologies. We're actually going to have 3 days this fall and in this winter. One will be a space day. We'll probably hold it out in El Segundo. One will be based on AI, because we've had just tremendous demand. We have a number of programs in AI, so we'll have a swim lane on AI. And the third one will probably be going back to quantum. We had an enormous amount of interest in quantum sensing, but more importantly, quantum technologies that are commercializable now and that work now. You saw the article in the Wall Street Journal the other day about the quantum sensing company that's using the Earth's magnetic pull to substitute for GPS. That's one of the companies we work with, actually. So there's some great stuff going on. The tombstone for us and the drop the mic moment for us is this is what we've done since 2021, 145 rounds of private financing. And again, we're not an investment bank. This is the Department of Defense. About $1.25 billion of private capital invested. But more importantly for you, because this is where the exits take place, almost $700 million in M&A activity. The public markets, as you know, are pretty much closed, not because of any other reason than there is so much money in private-to-private transactions or public-to-private transactions. And so we see a lot of M&A activity and a lot of M&A interest by the big primes and other companies in the technologies we invest in. And then the other point I want to bring up is, as I mentioned earlier, my partner, Andreas Alcantar, $662 million of state and local money pulled out, supplemental to US government money for you, the performers, and the projects that they work on. And then the obvious point is 20 new products and services. So essentially, this is what we're about, which is helping companies like yours and people like you take DARPA dollars, accelerate them, get to the commercial markets faster, mate those dollars with private sector dollars, but non-adversarial dollars, and then help you ramp up and be successful. And again, we have a lot of shots on goal at DARPA, which is fantastic. We want to score more goals, and we only score goals if you're successful. So our little office is designed to help you be successful. Thanks for your time.